Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial on how to use the black synthetic paper by the paper mill. So as you can see here today, I've got some of the new paper mill black synthetic paper that is being sold at Riot Art and Craft. So I've got it in various different sizes. They come in 5x7, A4, A3 and A1 size. Now, this is a black synthetic paper that is very similar to yupo paper, but it doesn't quite work in the same way. So I just wanted to share some of my tips and tricks on how I've used this paper and some things to do and some things not to do. Now, today I'm going to be using pearlescent alcohol inks by Tim Holtz by Ranger Inks. So I've got Envy, Enchanted, and I also have another pearlescent one here called Celestial. I'm going to be using Pinata ink, so I've got the Blanco, which is the white. I've got the Claro Extender, and then I've also got some of the Paper Mill alcohol inks. So these are just the regular colours, they're not the pearlescent or the metallic ones. So I've got the turquoise and the ultramarine. I'm also going to be using some of the Pinata Gold and also some other isopropyl alcohol just to show you guys how to use this paper. First off, I just want to explain the sort of paper that we're using here. So if you've used yupo paper before, you're probably familiar with the fact that it's quite a shiny surface. The alcohol will glide very easily over the surface of the paper, and it's very easy to manipulate the alcohol on the white paper. However, with this black one, it has a lot more of a rougher texture to it. So when you're using it, I'm finding that the alcohol is soaking into the paper quite easily. It's very hard to manipulate the alcohol at some time, and you have to work very quickly. And some of the things that I'm used to doing on the white yupo paper, I can't do on this one. There's been a lot of trial and error, and this is actually being done on the back of one of those errors. So I'm going to show you today how to use this paper so that you can make the most out of the black paper and not get too frustrated in the process. So I want to talk a bit about the alcohol. So normally when I'm doing alcohol inks, I use a 99.8% pure isopropyl alcohol. You can use anywhere up from 90% pure isopropyl alcohol. It is a little bit hard to come by at the moment, considering everything that's going on in the world and coronavirus, and everyone decided to go out and stock up on isopropyl alcohol. But thankfully it's coming back in stock. So if you're in Australia, I got this one from a company called JCar. You can find it at some pharmacies, you can get it at art supply shops, but make sure that you want something as pure as possible. You also want to make sure that when you're using the isopropyl alcohol, you're in a very well ventilated area and ideally using a mask. I'm currently outside, so if you hear some birds and wind, that's probably why. Making sure that you want very well ventilated area. Now, as I'll show you later, with this isopropyl alcohol, you can't use it all the time with the black yupo paper, because it doesn't quite work out properly. So the other item that I'm using is the Claro Extender by Pinata. So this is an alcohol solution that I use for alcohol inks. I tend to only use it when I really need to, if my isopropyl alcohol doesn't work. So this is the one that I'm using with the pearlescent inks on this black paper. So again, I'll show you some of the things to do and some of the things not to do, and hopefully you can learn from my mistakes, and when you get to play around with this black paper, you know exactly what to do. So, on the paper mill paper, Riot do have a caveat on here to say that this paper is to use with the paper mill shimmer, metallic, pearl and white alcohol inks only. I haven't actually had a chance to try those alcohol inks purely because they were all sold out when I bought this paper. I'm hoping that I can get my hands on some eventually, but for the moment I'm using these Ranger inks. So these are the pearlescent inks by Ranger, you need to make sure with the pearlescent inks that you give them a really good shake before you use them, because it will loosen all the pigment inside. So these are fantastic, but I do find that they work very differently on this black paper when you compare it to the white paper. So again, I'm going to show you some of the tips and tricks that I do in terms of using these pearlescent inks on this black paper. But first, I'm going to shake everything up. A good shake. Now, one simple technique to using these inks, what you can do is literally just drip them on. So I find this is a really good technique just to get some beautiful circles on your paper. Try the blue. Now, what I have found with these is you don't want to get too close to another colour, because if you do, one can bleed into the other. Now, in some circumstances when I've done this, it's worked out really nicely and I've really liked the effect, but in sometimes when I've done this, it just kind of mixes and it doesn't really look as great as I want it to. Now, put another drop of green. That will then go back into the blue. Now, if you're familiar with using alcohol inks before, you'll know that sometimes you can get this bleed through on the side here. So you can see that it's not a perfect circle anymore on the edge. Unfortunately, sometimes when you're using these inks on this paper, it can get a bit rough around the edges, and then sometimes you get this beautiful outline. You will notice with these inks is that you will get a dark ring around the pearlescent ink. Now, unfortunately, there's no way of getting around that, so you just have to think that if you are doing a painting with the inks that is using the drip method, just remember that you are going to have that line around the side. So if we put some pink in here, so you can see, the pearlescent comes up really nicely on this paper, but you have to be very careful. As you can see on this side, what's happened is I've put the 3 dots very close together. I've put quite a lot of alcohol down. They've then blended into each other, and it's basically just resulted in a very strange looking line. Now, here's an example of where the green has dried before the pink's gone down, and instead of mixing with the green, it's actually gone around it. So I really like that effect. If I add another blue in the middle, let's see if this mixes. See what happens. So you can see now that the other colours have dried, the blue, instead of bleeding in as much, on this side it's actually bumping up against that little ridge that I spoke about before. However, with the green didn't have as much of that ridge, so it has bled through. So there are some awesome pictures that I've done with this, and let me just show you one. So here's an example of a piece that I've done, and this has already been finished with varnish, where I just did the drops in various areas. You can see that there is some bleed through in some, but for the most part the pearlescent drops have stuck to just being a really nice circle, and I think it gives it a really nice effect. Then once I finished it with the varnish, the black goes quite dark, and so you can see when compared to this, quite a different contrast in the colour, and it just has a really nice finish. But this is an example of something that you could do with the pearlescent inks on this paper. It will take a lot of patience, it will take a bit more time than just mucking around, but I found that this is one of the more simple techniques and you can still do some really cool effects. Now, if the dots really aren't your thing, what you could do is try mixing the alcohol inks with the Pinata blending solution, the Claro extender. So all we do here, put a few drops of that down, go for the pink, and then you want to move it around just a little bit. And then what you have is this beautiful halo effect where you've got all the alcohol around the outside and you've got this kind of starburst in the middle of where the alcohol's gone, where the ink has gone. Green one. Now you can decide to move it around with a straw. But as you'll see, very similar to using dark colours on the white yupo paper, you can see clearly where the pearlescent alcohol ink has been dropped, and then you can see the outline around it. So you can see here with the pink that there is a very distinct circle in the middle as to where that pink has gone, and you can see the alcohol around the outside. Now the other option you can do is if you put a few drops of the alcohol, few drops of your pearlescent, and then grab a paintbrush and just start painting it on. So if you want a more subtle pearlescent background, then this is your way to go. So then you can add some more, add a few more drops of the pearlescent one, and then use your paintbrush to kind of get that really nice background. So this effect is really nice if you're looking for, a subtle background, or you want a subtle backdrop of colours and then you want to maybe draw something else on top. You can get these really subtle colours in here. Use the paintbrush, but you do have to move really quickly. So one technique I also used is actually putting the alcohol on the brush, putting the pearlescent on the brush, and then brushing it on. So I found that this way actually you end up with a lot more colour on the paper as opposed to putting the alcohol down first and then putting the pearlescent on top. It's just going to mean you are going to have to do a few layers, and you will have to eventually come in with a heat gun and dry it off before you go through the different layers. What you can do is, if you've got your dots down, you can also put some alcohol on your brush and then go over those dots that you've already done. Thank you for watching my video on how to use the Paper Mill synthetic paper for alcohol ink. I really hope you enjoyed it and that you learnt something valuable. Please stick around and have a look at the other videos that I've posted about using this paper. There are some really cool tips and tricks. I hope you can get something good out of it and that you have a successful story when you're utilising this paper. Stick around and let me know